Listen, Jane, everybody likes a good gag, but some practical jokes just aren't funny. Now, one of these days, you're going to cause someone some trouble. Real trouble.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I'm going to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what trope are we talking about today?
This week, we are playing some practical jokes.
Yep, practical jokes and pranks. Timeless, classic sitcom trope. I feel like we often start by saying, let's get into the minds of these crazy sitcom writers. Why do they go back to this trope again and again? I feel like this one is pretty self-evident. A practical joke is by definition a joke. And sitcoms allow us to experience them in the safety of a fictional world. And, you know, we get all of the sort of lesson learning and life experiences and maturing and everything. Just it's all right there for the taking. So I want to ask you, what is your experience playing and or, you know, being the victim of pranks, practical jokes, etc.?
Oh, wow. I feel
I love how you're surprised every time when I ask.
Yeah. So the reason I said wow this time is because I feel like we could just do an entire podcast on all of the shenanigans.
Yes, let's not do
that my friends and I got up to.
Boil it down to the key essentials.
Okay, key essentials. Yeah, man. I think I was not much of a prankster when I was younger. Certainly not like the Jan's age that we're going to see in the Brady Bunch. But there was a whole thing when I was in high school that my friends, we all did to each other. It was called gnoming. And we would go around and we would take lawn ornaments like gnomes and other, various lawn ornaments out of people's yards from all around different neighborhoods and then decorate a friend's yard. And so that was like, it was kind of like a prank war. I mean, and we woke up one morning at my house, I think it was Easter morning, to a full like Munchkin land setup. My friends had gone above and beyond with the gnoming of my yard, so much so that my dad busted out like the old like VHS camcorder, and we have a video of it.
We need to send this to the local news.
It might be in the other room with all of our old tapes. So yeah, so I think that would be like, in terms of practical joke, like prank, that kind of looms large as with all of my high school friends. Like if we go visit Bryn and you say gnoming, she'll be like, oh, and she'll know, we all kind of have that memory.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of pranks and a lot of sort of like weird things that we got up to that were sort of prank adjacent, at least when I was a kid. There was definitely lots of prank phone calls, all kinds of weird ongoing inside jokes and stunts and stuff. But for better or worse, I continued to be friends and to live with a lot of my old childhood friends well throughout my 20s. And I feel like as time went on more and more, I was the victim of practical jokes.
Because
more
you're
often.
so easy to troll.
Well, yes, that's what I was going to say, was that I seem to have something about me that makes people really enjoy just sort of watching me be befuddled and uncomfortable and confused.
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No.
Like, you're validating my daily experiences right now.
The one that I'll share, because I feel like this is one of your sort of classic, like out of the classic prank book things, is I was late to a poker game at some point. Again, this was in my 20s. And they did the old cellophane on the doorway trick. And I just fell for this so hook, line, and sinker.
This was after Home Alone because you were in your 20s.
Home Alone came out
Okay.
10, 15 years earlier. Yeah, like they were playing poker in the living room. And so I was walking in from outside, like through a deck or something, maybe through a little like foyer or mudroom. And just like, I'm late, I'm moving fast, like, hey, everybody, nice to see you. And just strode in to this living room and just like full body, not smush, even like ricochet, like full body bounce backwards.
How many strips had they done back
I
and
don't
forth?
know.
I just imagine you like walking through it like some sort of like American horror
No, it
story
wasn't
thing.
like it slowed me down to a stop. It was like wham and flying backwards in disbelief. So yeah, I feel like that one was one for the ages. So yeah, lots of experience as a kid with pranks. I'll say personally, maybe we'll get into it as we go through these episodes. I feel like pranking is for the young. I think that you should not pull pranks on anybody over the age of 30. Because just for myself, like that part of my personality died long ago. I'm not interested in being tricked or taken on little adventures or stunts or anything. And once the possibility of a cardiac arrest is even like on the table, yeah, you don't want to be pulling pranks that involve having people think that crazy things have happened or any of these things that we're going to get into in these episodes. I feel like if you want to do that with your friends when you're 15, fine. But yeah, you can't be messing around with full-grown adults. You don't know what's going to happen.
You know that now I'm just like, oh my God, I have to plan something massive.
No. All right. What are our shows? What was our lineup?
We are watching The Brady Bunch, Season 2, Episode 13, The Impractical Joker. Coach, Season 5, Episode 20, Dirty Tricks. Full House, Season 4, Episode 14, Is It True About Stephanie? And iCarly, Season 4, Episode 3, I Get Pranky.
Yeah, so Brady Bunch we've talked about once or twice before, but it was another one of those where we were stuck with the later episodes where everybody's grown up,
where
literally
Cindy,
too big for their britches.
Yeah, Cindy was wearing this like tiny little dress, but she was way too tall. I mean,
overgrown
and in this
cabbage
episode,
patch.
Season 2, she's wearing a tiny little dress, but she's tiny.
Everybody is. And I was surprised, given that this is already Season 2, everybody looks like babies. The whole parents, kids, Alice, everybody is young, adorable, fresh-faced. I just feel
Absolutely.
like
I mean, I think
go.
Marcia is still in middle school.
Yeah.
Because the other one that we watched when she was like first day of high school, right? And she had that whole thing about like, oh, I was so cool in junior high. That's like a season from now.
Yeah, no, Marcia and Greg are both young. Neither of them read as teenagers. Like they read as
Greg
like on the
does.
cusp of
Yeah,
but like actual teenagers, not TV teenagers.
Right.
Like he's a hunky guy.
Yeah, not like a Zach Morris who's actually 20 playing 16.
Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be a Jan episode. This is going to be a totally Jan-centric episode. I want to say right off the bat, and I say this in the spirit of love for everyone of all stripes, Jan dresses like a middle-aged lesbian, right? Like that's her vibe. She somehow, even though she's a child, and this is not an applicable thing to say, she looks like a grown woman with no makeup who's like teaching an art class or something. Like that's just how, almost like a young like Frances McDormand or something.
Yeah, well, so I think, I mean, this was a purposeful thing on the part of the, the costumers and the dressers and stuff. Like she is supposed to be this odd one. She is not cool like Marcia, and she's not little and cute like Cindy. She's this in between thing, and we're 2 episodes away, I think, from when it's another Jan episode and she's all upset about being the invisible middle child in a family full of blonde girls, and she buys like a Jackson 5 wig and starts wearing that around.
Yeah, I feel like this is becoming a cliche for me to say this about these characters, but she's a little Patrick Bateman. She's a little psychopath. We get so many...
She absolutely is in this episode.
Yeah.
She's like giggling and smiling, and she's doing that middle child thing, right? She's just trying to get attention in any way possible.
Yes, but she also like has a fundamentally different personality than her two sisters
and her
which
mom.
Is good.
Yeah, and she kind of is like the boys.
Yes,
but she's outcast because she's one of the girls.
Yeah, I mean, she's like the boys in at least this one specific way, so let's get into it. This episode is all about Myron the mouse,
yes.
right?
Well, it's all about Jan and her practical jokes.
Yeah.
So it opens and we're in the kitchen and Cindy and Jan are having some cookies and Marcia's kind of standing there talking to her mom and talking to her sisters and Alice is there and Alice is like, oh no, look at my new coat. There's an ink stain on it. And then Jan's giggling quietly and everyone rushes over and they're like, oh no. And Jan doesn't get up and she laughs really big and she turns around and she's like, oh no, what are you gonna do? Ha 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 ha. And they all start eyeing her suspiciously because apparently she's been doing this for a while. And she goes over and she rips off the ink stain and she's like, how are you ever gonna get out this plastic ink stain?
Yeah. Plastic ink spot.
Yeah.
Now, I know this was a thing. This was one of your classic old-timey gags. Fake stains, right? It was funny to convince somebody that their clothes were stained in a way that was not real.
I mean, look, you have a nice long history of mystery spots on your clothes.
I will admit it. Like, if I saw a big conspicuous stain on nice clothing and then it turned out to be plastic, that would be an emotional roller coaster of the type that I just requested nobody ever take me on. But I'm incredulous about the plastic part. Like,
yeah, I mean, you would think that something more like a felt or a fabric would like mix in better with the fact that you're laying it on fabric, but who knows? Like, we're not seeing it up close, so we can't tell. It's like the fake vomit on the floor. Yeah, it's a little bit shiny, but so is, regular vomit sometimes. So,
yeah, but that's on the floor. I don't know. The whole thing seemed odd to me, but yeah, this is our into, Jan's obsession with pranks.
Right, and then in this opening scene, we get a spider in the cookies that they're eating.
Fake spider.
And the mom is like, look, Jan, I know that you're having fun with this, but you need to be careful. Sometimes pranks can go too far, so you just need to be thoughtful about it.
She goes, one of these days, you're going to cause someone real trouble. And that's when Jan does the first of her many Kubrick glowering smile shots where she lowers her eyes and looks up at the camera and just smiles ear to ear like a total
psychopath.
So at that point we switch over, we meet Myron, right?
The boys are coming down and Greg is doing the science project where he's got to take care of a little tiny white mouse.
Myron won't run through the maze.
Well, he's got to train him. He's got a week to keep him at home and train him to run through the maze. And so then Jan's like, oh, that's so cool. Let me play with him. And then she immediately, that was the third prank. She immediately takes him downstairs when she's playing with him and shoves it in her mom and sister's faces. And they're all screaming. And that was the third prank. So then everybody comes downstairs and they're like, what's going on? And then Greg is like, oh, no, this is my science project. I didn't know Jan just said she wanted to pet him. I didn't know she was going to mess with you guys. Just then the dad comes home. And so the mom is like, Greg, you can't keep that thing in the house. Like, none of us like mice. And Jan's like, I like mice. And then the dad's like, well, he's got a science project, so let's see if we can come to a compromise. And the compromise is that they can keep Myron in his cage in the garage in the evenings, and that's also at night. Like, that's where he can train him in the garage. He can run his science project in the garage and keep Myron in the cage in the garage.
Yeah, and this is the aforementioned personality difference. We see it's just like night and day that Jan doesn't mind mice. She's in this sense, she's like the boys. She likes to play, and all the other ones are freaked out. And this is going to be her big prank that gets her in trouble, is that the boys are going to lock up little Myron in the garage.
The boys realize Greg wakes up in the middle of the night and is like, oh my God, the neighbors have a cat. We've got to go and get Myron and bring him inside. And so Jan is creepily staring out the window in the middle of the night for no reason as her brothers go outside. Like, she doesn't come to the window. She's just already standing there staring in this very creepy fashion. It's very Psycho, like Psycho the movie, right? So then the boys come outside and they go, and she's watching them with, curiosity. They go into the garage, and then she sees them come back inside with Myron's cage. She doesn't know why, but the boys have decided that they have to bring him back in because he's going to get eaten by the neighbor's cat. So they bring him back in, they leave him in their room, and they say, we're going to wake up super early and take him back out to the garage, and nobody will know the difference. But Jan sees it all happen because she's weirdly standing at the window in the middle of the night. And then she sneaks into the boys' room and steals Myron as like the ultimate prank on the boys.
Yeah, and puts him in the garbage or a hamper or some kind of a big container, and that's going to be her joke, is I'm going to steal him so you don't know where he is, but I'm going to put him in this place where I know where he is and he'll be safe.
Yeah, and
it'll be a harmless
she
prank.
sets him down in there, I'm like, that's a laundry hamper. He's chewing through that.
This is what we learned in our Facts of Life episode. You need liners and layers in your baskets and barrels
so
and
the
things.
critters don't get in.
Yeah, and so we see overnight this is all a real mouse, by the way, that they got to do all this stuff, and this mouse chews through the hamper. It's like a wicker
they have this
thing.
like super close up shot of this little one, and they have two mice. They have the little tiny cute one that the cast actually handles, and then they have the much bigger one that has a much longer tail that looks more like a rat. That was the one that was trained to chew through the thing, and was like, they did all the close up shots of it like running and doing the things that it was loose in the house after it got out. But they got a ton of close up shots of this, mouse chewing through the hamper and then coming out of the hole and then kind of running around the house, just barely missing a few different things throughout the whole next day.
We get this like Hitchcock level suspense scene where Mrs. Brady is like choosing her shoes and her bags and stuff from her closet.
Yes.
And the mouse is in the closet and like scampering around, and she's barely missing.
She grabs the shoe that it just crawled out of, and it crawled into the next shoe. But if she had grabbed the pair, she'd have it. She just keeps missing it.
Yeah, so just really sort of playing on the dramatic irony of like, nobody knows what the situation is here. The boys don't know that Jan has taken the mouse. Jan doesn't know that the mouse has escaped. The parents have no idea about any of this. This is all going to sort of come to a head. Side note, Mike Brady, the dad, drinks his coffee out of a tiny little yellow cup that holds like 2 or 3 ounces of coffee.
They were teacups.
It's like
they were like little,
set.
they were like
but it's like a toy tea set almost. Like
I think
little
he's
yellow
just tall.
plastic thing. So Alice is going to spot the mouse.
Yes.
I guess before that happens, at some point the boys are going to realize the mouse is missing.
Right. So there's
and they're going to think the cat got him.
Or that he just got out because they were in the house, right? So they there's all this stuff that's supposed to happen early in the morning. The dad tells us the night before that he's got an early business meeting, a Saturday early morning business meeting, and he's cranky about it. And then the boys are now going to wake up super early and get Myron and his cage back to the garage. And Alice is getting up early, Alice is coming in early because the day before was her day off. Yeah. And so she stayed over at her sister's or her aunt's or something. And so she was coming back early in the morning to be there before breakfast. So many people in the house are up very early, like earlier than they would normally be for a Saturday. And the boys realize as soon as they wake up, Myron's gone, but the cage is still there. And so they were like, how did that happen? We've got to find him before anybody wakes up. So they're searching all around the house, and the dad comes downstairs to go to work and is like, sees them all with their asses in the air and their heads in like the planter box and the fireplace and looking all around for stuff. And he's like, are you going to tell me what you're looking for? Yeah. And they were like, and he was like, you can just say, Dad, I'd rather not say. And they were like, Dad, we'd rather not say. And he was like, okay.
By the way, their initial concern that the mouse would be eaten by the cat doesn't really make any sense, right? Because the cat could not have gotten into this cage. Like, this cage is fine little bars or wires or whatever. It seemed like a silly thing to be concerned with in the first place.
Maybe, but like you can see when they lift up the cage that it's just like, it's just an up and down. So I suppose a cat could be.
And it's on a shelf.
Their garage is open. It's not like it's not like a closed-in garage. It's one of the more like a workspace kind of carport area.
Yeah, but it's still, it seemed like faulty thinking in the first place. But yeah, so now they've got their own farcical thing looking for the mouse all over the place.
And Jan's watching them like from the shadows in the corners giggling because she's been kind of waiting up for them to get up. I guess she doesn't sleep because she's a psychopath. And then Alice comes home and as she starts making breakfast, says goodbye to Mr. Brady or whatever. And then she spots the mouse. Yeah.
And she jumps up on the table. This was something I remember I brought in. I don't know if it was a mouse. I kind of think it was a snake. But I brought in a pet to school.
How did you have a pet snake?
It was like a pet that I had found.
Not
like
a pet. That's
like a
just
quote unquote, like an
gross.
animal.
You're like a little boy with worms and frogs in your pockets.
I brought in something to school
like
for
snakes.
show and tell. And my friend Ellis opened it too far and it got out.
And it was a snake in the classroom.
I don't remember.
I would lose my freaking mind.
I don't remember if it was a snake
and so everybody stood
mouse.
on their desk.
The teacher did. The teacher stood on her desk. And that's what I think of every time I see this trope of the ladies.
How did you get this snake out of the classroom?
I don't think we ever did. I think it was just on the leaves. I think it was just... Maybe it's still there.
No, you're...
Maybe it's in here.
Stop it!
But, yeah, so at this point, I just wanted to stop, and it just got me thinking, the status in our society of mice is so bizarre. Like, you even turned to me when we were watching, and it was like, isn't it weird that people are so afraid of mice? And, I get both sides of it. I mean, as somebody who's had to deal with having mice in my apartment and stuff, it is quite off-putting when you see a mouse scampering, in the corner of your room. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, isn't it weird that mice are have become this beloved character template from Mickey Mouse, Chuck E. Cheese, Fievel, The Rescuers? There's this grand tradition of Itchy and Scratchy, of mice being your go-to cartoon characters. That everybody likes them.
I think they're cute when they're not scampering around your house. They have kind of cute-ish features. And, in the same way, you wouldn't make an otter. An otter is cute like that, but they don't have legs, so they're not going to be walking around on land.
But why isn't it like Mickey the panda bear or something? That's everybody agrees those are cute.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I just find it odd.
I mean, but we do have a lot of bear mascots of things.
No,
you got
true.
Yogi Bear and you got Smokey the Bear.
The bear is amply represented. But yeah, it is funny that we all, or that many of us anyway, have are very much of two minds when it comes to mice. We want to kill them.
Well,
and love them.
Here's the thing: mice in your house sort of represents they leave poop everywhere. It's dirty, and that's that's I think that's
and
the
it's,
issue.
when you see it, it's like a big bug.
Yeah,
it's the love-hate relationship a lot of people have with the mice. Alice calls the exterminator, and so we get a sort of cut to the exterminator's on his way out. We don't see a body, right? We have no confirmation, but we get
but
this
he's
sort
got
of
this contraption, and he says he's released this horrible spray gas in the crawl space under the house because the wisdom is if you have one there must be friends, and so we'll treat the house. And because I guess there's a dog and kids, they weren't treating the inside of the house. Maybe they were just using traps and stuff there, but they put this poison down underneath the house.
Yeah, and so the boys come back in and everything kind of comes out. Alice explains, there was a mouse, but don't worry, I got the exterminator. And
the boys are like, crushed.
Well, they say his name was Myron. It's like the part in Fight Club when they're like, his name was Robert Palmfield or whatever. They're like, his name was Myron. And then Alice goes,
he was my science project.
Yeah, Alice goes, I'm a murderess.
Yes. And again, you've got Jan standing on the stairs, like in the background, just snickering to herself. She still thinks that...
Oh, right. She doesn't realize that he got out yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
She thinks Alice thinks she's seen another mouse.
Right.
I
So
don't know
now
why, because she's an idiot.
She's going to present the prestige, as it
Right.
were. She's going to tell everybody how she took them all for a ride.
Well, no, she tells the boys. She doesn't tell everyone. She just tells the boys. She goes, boys, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that I've tricked you or something. The good news is that Myron isn't dead. Come on. And she leads them up the stairs and she's laughing all the way. And the boys are like, really? And they aren't even mad that she's pranked them. They follow her up the stairs and she opens the hamper and they're like, it's empty. All I see is a big hole. And she looks down in it. And then she has the crushing reality that
yes, she's the murderess.
she's the one that did it.
Yeah. And that's, at this point, we're sort of cruising towards the end here. She comes back down, everything sort of comes out, everybody's upset. But then they find Myron, right? I mean, this whole time you don't actually see the dead mouse, so
Right.
you can kind of connect the dots here. And they find him outside?
The dad gets home and the mom and the other two girls come home, or I guess the mom was out shopping. The other two girls come down. Everyone's knows the story now. Everyone's been told. And while they're in the middle of relaying the story to the parents, Tiger, by the way, last episode that we'll see Tiger Tiger is like, woo!
He's the same exact kind of dog that the Bundys have.
Yes,
on
he's like this
Marriage
shaggy dog. Yeah. So he's outside sort of moaning in this kind of like weird, sad way. And they go outside and he's sitting next to his doghouse and he keeps looking back kind of mournfully inside his doghouse, like, woo, and howl, kind of like whining, howling. And Mike, the dad, looks in and is like, you know how Alice was scared of mice? I think Tiger might be too.
Yeah. And so now none of the girls, everybody loves Myron now. Everybody's happy to see him and play with him.
He's crawling all over everyone's hands.
Yes. I don't like that they hold him by the tail.
No, I didn't like that either. I think that's kind of fallen out of favor. Like people have heard, that's not a good way to hold them.
Yeah, to me it would be obvious that would be not comfortable, but I don't know. And so look, we get a pretty straightforward trajectory here. Jan, like we said, starts out blank slate, no conscience or ethics or sense of humanity of any kind, just a cold, dark stare like a young Michael Myers planning her next murder.
Creepy murder smile.
Yeah, and she's doing all these things with impunity and just kind of going like, oh, it's just so fun to set up the pins and knock them down and to watch people suffer. And her mom told her straight up, you're going to cause some real trouble at some point, and she did. And we get, just like I said, we get the sort of sitcom, specifically
she learned her lesson.
Yeah, we get the family sitcom guardrails of like, don't worry, das ex machina, nothing actually went wrong and everything's okay. But yeah, lesson learned.
I would say it was also a really good episode for like getting a good view of the AstroTurf. I feel like sometimes, even when they do the outside scenes, it's like kind of panning through, like, or they're just like on the patio. There was all of these scenes, and then at the end with the dog, and they're crawling around inside the doghouse to get Myron. Like there's just like, there was an up close of the AstroTurf where Myron was sitting on it. So I was like, okay, good AstroTurf episode.
Yeah, and just good Jan episode.
Yeah.
Nice to see her not being a bummer, to see her having a little zhuzh and not just being like, complaining about Marcia or something. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Moving on to Coach.
Season 5, episode 20, Dirty Tricks.
Yeah. So this one begins with, I think as Luther puts it, nothing better in life than two guys naked in a whirlpool or something.
Well, they're in two separate whirlpool tubs. They are, obviously they're at the athletic center at this university. So they have all sorts of therapeutic, athletic kind of things. And it's the off season, so they're bored. And we find out while they're sitting there in these, separate, very tall
Hayden and
whirlpool
Luther,
tubs. Yes. They are in the midst of a prank war with another coach.
Yeah, they're reminiscing about all their great pranks. So this other coach is, I was going to say you'll have to help me with the context here, but I think the episode makes it pretty clear. So Dauber, the lovable dummy, assistant coach, he's got a fiance, I guess, who's also a coach, the women's basketball coach at the school. I really like this character. She doesn't show up at first, but she's got a really fun energy. She's basketball coach, so she's really tall and lanky.
Yes.
She's got the 80s hair and everything, but she wears it as well as anybody could.
Yes.
And she really, she's got a really good look and manner to her where you buy her as a coach. She doesn't seem like some sort of, hot lady off of the catalog or anything.
that they put in this.
But she still really has charm and is just like a really kind of engaging presence. But so...
And she looked vaguely familiar to me. So the first time we see her, we don't even really see her face because she sneaks into the room where the guys are saying how great they are at pranks and steals their clothes.
Yeah. This is, like you said.
And they don't see her.
Yeah, she is their nemesis. And so as Luther and Hayden in this cold open are reminiscing about all the great pranks that they pulled, she, sneaks in and grabs their clothes and then cut to the theme song. And then it's sort of, we're dropped back into the episode and it begins with Dauber pleading to the coach, to Hayden. He says, when will the madness end? Right? He's caught in the middle of these two.
Yes. Because they have this, very kind of contentious relationship. Hayden is thinking about it as all in fun, but Dauber is like, I think maybe it's going a little far. You're making fun of my fiance all the time. I mean, you guys are not very nice to each other. I just don't know. And then in the middle of this conversation, in she comes with her hair all wrapped up in a towel and slams her shampoo bottle down on Hayden's desk and is like, blue dye? In my shampoo? I have a speech to give at the Alumni Association tonight. That I'm standing up and he's just...
Another one of your classic old-timey pranks, right? Putting something in the something. But yeah, he, like you said, she's got the towel on.
Yes.
And so he's like, all right, I'll end the prank war if you call me the master. Right?
Well, she comes in and demands a truce. She's like, this has gone too far. I'm going to have blue hair at this event tonight, and it's a really big event, and this is very embarrassing. This has gone too far. We need to call a truce. And he gives it right. He doesn't want to because he's bored, and this is keeping him busy in the off season. And he says, if you call me master or the master?
He says this is very much, he has the maturity level of a Zach Morris type character. He says, you have to call me the master, and then I will remit, and then, we could have the truce. And so she does. She says, fine, you're the master. So he says, okay, we have the truce. And then she takes off the towel and reveals that her hair wasn't blue. She figured it out before. Yeah. So I guess the idea is she's tricked him into agreeing to a truce without his prank having actually worked.
Right.
And so that's going to lead to shenanigans.
She's still one up on him, or so he thinks. And he says later on, when it's revealed that he has decided that the prank war is still on, that he says that truce was made when I thought she had blue hair. No blue hair means the truce is null and void. So look out.
Yeah.
And then he's saying this at the middle of this alumni banquet, where she is standing has just been announced to give
well
her
hang
speech.
On though, because after they make this truce, right?
Right.
And they are trying to abide by it for a little while, they have to get out their joke season, as they put it, their joke season energy somewhere. So you have a side plot,
I'm
which
going
is...
to say a little while means like 3 hours that afternoon.
But there's a side plot
Yes.
where we get the really psychotic
Yes.
pranks, in my opinion. We start off with Luther doing the very funny thing that you see in lots of TV shows and movies, where somebody just doesn't have the right barometer, and so they're like, oh, what if we spray bug spray in his eyes? Won't
Right.
that be funny? Just saying like crazy murderous things. But what they settle on is almost as insane, in my opinion. They convince him that he's going to be fired, right?
Right.
It's that kind of prank.
Yeah. So there's this other guy who is in the office upstairs.
Howard.
And so Luther has done this thing, I guess every year around this time, he orders something off, out of the back of a magazine as like a hobby to keep him busy during the off season. Well, this year he's decided to take up beekeeping. So he ordered bees by mail. And so he goes and picks it up. And then in the scene before, what's her name? Judy comes in and does the whole thing with the towel. Luther has gone to get his bees that have been delivered, and then we see him through the window on the outside of the office going like, running away from this swarm of bees that he's opened incorrectly. Yeah. Now it's chasing him. So then all of this happens, and he somehow gets away from the swarm of bees. They decide they're going to pick on the guy upstairs. He takes his coat rack and slams it into the ceiling so the guy will come down. The guy comes down. He's covered in calamine lotion. They're like, what's going on? He's like, somebody put a swarm of bees in my office. Sparkles in the eyes. Now Hayden gets an idea. Let's convince him that the reason that those bees were in his office was because this dean put them there because he wants his office and he's trying to get him fired.
Yes, which is very funny in the way it ends up in the episode. But this is the worst kind of prank, in my opinion. This is the best example of this, I think, is the famous scene from The Simpsons where Homer puts police tape in front of Flanders' house. So when Flanders comes home, Homer comes running out. It's just this really famous moment where Homer is going, I made you think your family was dead, but they're not. But you thought they were. But they're not. But you thought they were. And like Flanders is just standing there in shock because it's like, of course, the trauma of even thinking that for a moment has these like enormous mental repercussions.
Right.
And that's why it's not cool to take people on these rides and go, hey, we're going to make you think something fucked up happened, but don't worry, it didn't.
Yeah, that's not so much a prank. Those are more mean.
But that's what they do. They're convincing him that A, his job is in jeopardy, and B, it's because of this dean, and C, the bees are like the dean's, enforcers.
Right. This was all the dean's plan all along. So then they go to this alumni thing, and we find out Hayden's like given up on the truce, and he's rubbing his hands together, just waiting for the next thing to happen. And Judy goes up to start giving her speech, and she's got a slide projector behind her, and she's clicking through. And I just this rubbed me the wrong way.
This bit does not age well.
It does not age well. We're talking about a women's basketball team, and she is going to announce each one of the players with a picture of them showing up on the screen
with
behind her.
A little blurb,
and
say.
She's telling what they are, why they're so valuable
this
to the
person
team.
embodies teamwork.
Right. And the first one that pops up is a gorilla.
Yes,
and I
very
was like,
unfortunate.
yikes. And then it's like the butt of a pig
donkey,
and a donkey
pig.
and all this
Yes.
stuff. And
so,
there was a she said that like her next accolade for the next player was like they're a good ball handler, and it's like it happened to be an otter or like a
seal
dolphin,
with a ball.
with a ball. So it was like, I mean, everybody's laughing. She turns around, she clicks through, realizes none of her players' pictures are there. It's all these, unfortunate pictures of animals or animals' asses, and she just says, "Well, I guess we won't have a visual portion to this presentation."
It is unfortunate. I think the spirit in which it is meant to be mean is simply they're animals.
Right.
It's just meant to be like silly and very like degrading, but in a way that's just like, you're just like
animals?
A big dumb horse or whatever. But the fact that the first one is a gorilla.
And I was just like, geez. And I was like, so that would be it. Like Hayden's career over. You want to talk about canceled? Like today's
But again, he wouldn't do it exactly like that
exactly.
in this time. It didn't have exactly those same connotations. Maybe in some circles it did, but that's not what they're going for.
Right.
And so this leads to the final act where the wife, the fiance rather, she's resigned, right?
Yeah,
and
she's like, that's it. She doesn't tell Hayden that. She
that's
finishes
the
her
whole
speech,
thing.
but then the next day, Dauber comes into work and he's like, "Coach, we need to have a talk."
So both us, the audience, and Hayden are very skeptical and dubious
that this is a
about
real
this.
quit.
Yes,
Yeah.
and within the show, Hayden challenges it at first, but then pretty quickly seems to buy into it. Whereas I was skeptical the whole
All
rest
the way
of the
to
episode.
the end,
I was like, come on, just the same way I didn't see a body, so I knew that Mouse wasn't dead. I haven't seen a proper resignation, so, that this woman, that Judy is still off screen in the shadows somewhere. Yeah. This whole thing has prank written all over it.
Yeah, and I was kind of keeping the same, kind of one foot in both sides of it as well. But Dauber has not been involved in any of this prank stuff. And he makes a really good point. I mean, by the way, that would be the best way to do it, to finally get him involved. But he makes a really good point because all of the other interactions between Hayden and this coach Judy are him insulting her for being so tall or having such a long neck or, being so lanky or, all of these things just about like, her physical person. And so Dauber is like, well, how would you like it if I made fun of Christine? And he's like, there's nothing to make fun of Christine about. And he's like, oh yeah, well, she's so short, I can't even see her. And so he launches into this series of short jokes that he's very uncomfortable saying, but you watch Hayden get it. He starts to feel protective. Like, you can't just, like, I know you're just kidding, but you can't. And yes, she is short, but stop saying mean things about my wife, girlfriend, whatever. And so so then Dauber's like, do you see what I mean? How I'm very torn and I don't like it when you, like, the pranks are one thing, but the insults have got to stop.
Yeah, exactly. We also found out earlier in the episode that Hayden's personal third rail is his bald spot. He doesn't like it when people make fun of that. And, granted, look, the guy's tall, and at this point in sitcoms, they've learned to not film people from behind. But the whole rest of the episode, I'm staring at him going, does he have a bald spot or is it just a receding hairline? I can't quite tell.
Turn around.
Yeah, at some point in this, before we get the final confrontation with Judy, Howard bursts in again. And this is my favorite part of the episode. I just love this recurring thing of Howard. He is fully entrenched now in this war with the dean. Yes. And he's ranting about fire ants. He's like, he goes, what kind of, I think what we skipped earlier in the banquet part was that this character at some point had an outburst where he goes like, Dean, what kind of coward sends bees to do his dirty work?
Yeah,
and nobody knows what he's
Dean's
talking
like,
about.
what?
Yeah, and so now at this point he's like, okay, they send bees, we send fire ants. And he's like talking all about the fire ants and stuff. So yes, as much as I think it is horrible what they've done to him, it is a funny subplot.
And you have seen this guy, like this actor that you're talking about, who plays Howard, he's just he's another one of these character actors. You've seen him in a million things. He's got this sort of like wide mouth and kind of beady eyes. He always plays like the annoyed boss or the disgruntled coworker that's like ranting about something. He has that's the guy he always plays. His name's Kenneth Kimmins, but he tells Hayden and Luther that he and his wife broke into the science lab last night and stole thousands of fire ants and have released them into the dean's office. And he goes, do you know what the problem with fire ants is? The dean does.
Yeah, and so then, we kind of get back to the main story. We finally do get Judy coming in.
No, Hayden goes to her. Okay. And she is legitimately packing. And he, like you, is like, come on, this is a prank. You're not really going. Put the stuff back on the wall. What are you trying to go for here? And she's like, no, I'm serious. Like at first, he's like, but you played into it. You like fought back. And she's like, yeah, because I recognized that was the only way you were going to respect me. But then it didn't pay off. You never did respect me. It never stopped. It's been years of this and I can't take it anymore. You're insulting and it's a constant battle and I don't want to live like that.
Yeah. And then there's a very funny line where she goes, let me ask you this. Do you ever think of me as a woman? And he goes, oh, God. Oh, that's what this is about. You have a crush
on me. I was like, what a ninny.
It is just, it's the perfect thing we always talk about with these, dopey 90s sitcom dads, husbands, whatever.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I just wanted to say, throughout all of this, Hayden's pleated pants and his tucked-in shirt make him look like he is 74 years old.
Yes.
Like, his style is so, like, shuffleboard, like, country club.
Shuffleboard chic.
But, he confesses to he says he's impressed with her, right? Because she's, like, wants to maybe take some solace in the narrative of like, oh, you were threatened by me and that's why you were so mean.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I was impressed. And then he goes,
maybe she came in with all these lauds. Like she was this highly recruited coach and landed herself on Sports Illustrated, like, before she even came or right before she got there.
Yeah. And he goes, maybe I was impressed to the degree where you feel like you're not as good as the person, like basically saying like the definition of feeling threatened. And then, there's, throughout all of this, I personally am still wondering if this is real.
Like, right. When's the turnabout going to happen?
Like, what is this? And then there isn't.
She decides she's not going to resign. He properly apologizes in his weird sort of like, I can't even say it way. And then there had been this conversation earlier about the stinkiest type of manure that they could maybe get as part of a prank, right? Well, so now we're supposed to be like the next day or something, and the Hayden and Luther are sitting in the office, and all of a sudden the window, they have like it's almost like a basement office because the window is just like one of those windows that's at the top of the wall,
storm windows.
And so anyway, that's open and they hear this rumbling and they turn and look, and like a cement truck chute kind of sticks in through the window and out starts pumping and dumping just piles of stinky sloppy manure.
Yeah.
And Hayden runs to the other side of the room and it's splattering all over his desk and all over the floor. And that's the end of the episode.
Yep. That's our final prank. And so again, tracking the trope, I mean, it's kind of a similar thing. We don't have any endangered mice or anything, but it's like, don't go too far with the pranks, it's all fun and games until somebody, quits their job because you hurt their feelings with your gorilla slide.
You end up to your knees in shit.
Yeah. Nothing else to say. Moving on to Full House.
Season 7, episode 14. Is it true about Stephanie?
Yeah, we've covered Full House a bunch of times. It's a favorite go-to on our podcast. You can tell what era of Full House it's in because it begins with the Alex and Nikki scenes. I feel like these later stage Full House episodes It's really living up to the name. The house is very full.
Yes.
And they always begin.
They've had to build an extension in the attic for the family of 4 that now lives up there.
There always needs to be at least one child under the age of 3 in this house at all times.
And Michelle has gotten a little too old now, so we have Aunt Becky and Uncle Jesse's twin boys.
And the episodes almost always begin with this little sort of family circus comic strip style, just like a little
like a
mini
vignette.
scene. Yes. In this case, it's Alex and Nikki watching their parents bang, essentially watching them like make out and saying "have mercy."
Okay,
the whole thing is
so Becky. When the show starts, Becky is trying to get the boys to say "have mercy,"
to say their dad's catchphrase,
which is "have mercy," which he only says when something
he's
is
turned on,
like sexy, exactly. And so they said to Becky, their mom, we don't say that. And it's very cute. And then Jesse gets home and he gives mom a kiss and the kids say, have mercy. And that's the joke.
Yeah, they say have mercy when they start making out.
Not
I don't
because
know.
they're
I don't
having
like it.
sex or like full on making out.
No,
He
of course
literally
not.
gives his
They're
wife
starting
a
to get
kiss.
randy.
This is showing what a prude you are. He comes home from work
I
and
don't
gives
like
his wife
little
a kiss.
children and 2-year-olds.
Oh my goodness, how these 2-year-olds know when to say have mercy. I'm clutching my pearls.
But the main story of this is going to be very much a Stephanie episode.
Yes, we get 2 middle daughter episodes in this lineup.
Yes, and this is going to be a big episode for Gia. I remember Gia was a presence in the later days of the show. She's one of your sort of frenemies, you know. I feel like she's a little bit like the Jamie Gertz character in Square Pegs. She's always going to be the one that kind of, she's got an inside track. And she's very canny. She knows what's cool. She's going to make fun of you if you do something weird. Like so she might be an ally, she might be a foe, but that's sort of her role to play.
Yeah, I mean, she's generally the mean girl. I think it's not until even later than this, like when they're in like 9th grade or something, that maybe there's a little bit of friendship there.
I definitely am not up on my Full House chronology, but I was thinking this might be the episode that turned the tide a little, because Gia is in the band with Stephanie, I'm pretty sure, when they do their Let's Have a Band thing. I mean, look, part of it is that it
makes sense.
You're not going to have that many recurring characters. But yeah, I feel like she's one of these characters that's initially presented as an adversary. Yeah. And then it's like, all right, let's bring her into the mix. Kind of like the Fast and Furious movies. You know, everyone becomes friends and joins the team eventually.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so, I mean, look, Gia's Marla Sokoloff. I never know exactly how to say her last name. You've seen her in a million things. She was in that cheerleader movie where they were like bank robbers or something. She's one of those kids that I kind of grew up with watching on Full House. And so then when she like was a teenager and in her early 20s and was in other things, I was like, oh, good for her. Because Stephanie definitely fell off the map for a while.
Yeah. I mean, she eventually hosted the No Pants dance party or something.
What?
But this episode is going to focus on an entirely different prank war going on here. This is not your slipping on a banana peel.
Yeah, this isn't an all in good fun prank war.
No, this is
I'm mad at you.
Yes, you mentioned Mean Girls before. This is like a Regina George-esque Machiavellian. I'm going to undermine your confidence. I'm going to destroy your reputation. Yes. I'm going to ostracize you if you cross me. So this all begins with Stephanie has a crush on a boy named Jamie.
Well, she doesn't even say that. Gia has a crush on a boy named Jamie. So Gia is telling this other girl that the new boy is like, isn't he so cute? Look at him. He's so dreamy. And so we find out first that this girl Gia is into the new boy. And then apropos of nothing, you know, the boy comes over to Stephanie's locker because her locker is always sticking and she can't get it open, and he comes over and helps, and he's like, hey, do you want to go out? My band's playing at this club. And she's like, oh, well, that's, that works out well. My uncle owns that club. And he's like, really?
Yeah, a few things about Jamie. His band is Human Pudding.
That's
right?
the name of his
Great
band.
90s
Human
band
Pudding.
name. Yeah,
Yes.
could totally see that being like the collaboration between Beck and like Dave Grohl or something.
Sure.
Call us Human Pudding.
Every time I hear anyone, but especially me, say human pudding, inside my head what I hear is humid pudding, and which is gross.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing is kind of gross. But this kid, he's like the human version of the Ninja Turtles from
the
the Michael
humid
Bay
version.
The Michael Bay Ninja Turtles movie. He's just nothing but like trinkets and dog tags and like layers.
I don't think I noticed that he had all the like shell necklace kind of things
He's got,
on.
yes,
but
like
he
5
definitely
different
had
layers.
that thing of like, I'm wearing sort of like oversized surfer dude clothes, but it's like winter or something, so there's like a thickness to me. It's like he has on multiple t-shirts and then one of those flannel zip up sweatshirt hoodies that's like extra padded on the inside but just looks like a thin kind of sweatshirt with the flannel on it on the outside. He was very puffy but also lanky at the same time.
It was like the costume department gave him like a tray of things to choose from, and he just grabbed everything and like threw it on himself.
It's like the moment in Friends where he puts on all the clothes. Like he looked puffy like that.
Yes, he's got floppy hair. It always cracks me up, especially in the 90s when they have to do with a boy this thing of like, oh, he's got to be hot. He's got to be so dreamy.
Cool.
Yeah, and they're just like, especially with a kid this young, like they don't really know what to do. Give him floppy hair.
Exactly. Well, they all have floppy hair, and I have to say, like that I call it Nick Carter hair because he was the one that like kept it forever. I guess his little brother did too, but he was a little too young for me. But yeah, that sort of parted down the middle. I mean, everybody had it, right? Like this kid had it. Nick Carter had it from the Backstreet Boys. Leo had it. Jonathan Brandis had it. Like every guy had
as Grandpa
that
Simpson
hair.
said, it was the style of the time. But so, he comes over at school at the lockers and stuff. And they have this thing going, like you said, him and Stephanie. And they say, oh, cool, let's hang out at Uncle Jesse's Smash Club. And Gia is...
She is like standing over on the other side of the hallway, kind of hidden, and she sees it and she's just so angry. And of course, the music tells us that something's going to happen.
So Gia comes over to the house, right? Like after the act break, we're back at the Tanner house, and Gia comes over, and she has a run-in with little Michelle, which is great. At this point, like you said, everybody's moved up a spot. You know, it's like in volleyball when you rotate. Like everyone switched positions a little bit. And now the Olsen twins as Michelle, they're not given little cutesy, come in and say 2 lines here. They have to pull their weight like everybody else with the dialogue and the comedy and everything.
They're the same age basically as Stephanie was when the show started.
Exactly.
They're in 2nd grade this season.
And so
Michelle is in 2nd grade this season.
Yeah, and so Gia's gonna come over and be like, hello, little Michelle. Like, it is very nice to meet you. My name is Gia. And Michelle just like, she might as well be like Mae West from like the 30s movies with a cigarette or something. She just looks over to Stephanie like, where'd you get this one?
Well, and she replies to Gia in that same like sing-songy little kid voice. And she's like,
well, gee, I would just love it if you gave me a lollipop so I could leave you guys alone to talk.
What she bribes her with a Tic Tac.
Yeah,
She's
that's
like,
what it is.
oh,
Tic
gee,
Tac.
really? A whole Tic Tac? Do I get to
just
keep
for
it?
me? Like she really leans into it. Does a good job.
Yeah. But so, this is all so that Gia can, in person, in her home, threaten Stephanie and say, stay the hell away from Jamie.
Right.
He's my dreamboat.
And you knew I liked him. And Stephanie was like, how the hell would I know that you liked him? He asked me out. Like, I don't know. I didn't know any of this.
Yeah. And Stephanie just holds her ground and is like, no, well, you can't tell me what to do. And so Gia's just like, all right, you will be sorry.
That's
and
right.
yeah, we get, again, like this stretches the definition of prank. I would call it more
Right.
like character assassination.
Yes.
But what happens?
So the next day at school, Stephanie walks in and everyone is laughing at her as she's walking into the building. And her friend grabs her immediately and like pulls her aside and is like, have you seen it? And she's like, what are you talking about? And she walks her over to her locker, and there's a sign on her locker that says something about like Stephanie paid Jamie $20 to go on a date. I mean, it wasn't all those words. It was, you know,
but
it was,
yeah, it's
but that
something-
was the thing. Like
It's not just Jamie. It's like
we'll
Stephanie
pay
like
for
has a
dates or
history of
something.
paying people to date her.
Right.
And it's bizarre. The whole thing, like it's just not. I don't
Well,
know.
and so everyone's laughing, and then a boy comes up to Stephanie and is like, "Hey, Stephanie, you only have to pay me $10. I'd go out with you." You know.
There's this kid, Scott, who's always dressed in a Hawaiian shirt and a bright red hat. And he is like the Greek chorus of like the herd mentality of these kids in the hallway.
He's a little mini MAGA before MAGA, right?
And anytime, whoever has been exposed, anytime there's like
Yes.
blood in the water,
He
this
gets
kid is
the
always,
line.
the first to run over and be like, hey, Stephanie, I got a $5 bill. Just like, he's always the first to get in the dig. And so, it comes out that everyone has been just completely convinced that Stephanie pays for dates.
Right.
And so, this kid, Jamie, again, I just love it, when the genders are reversed and it's the boy that has to be this like total non-character that just has no personality,
No
like
personality
total
at all.
nothing. And he's just like, crazy, this rumor that's going on, right? And Stephanie like tries to let him off the hook in the hopes that he won't buy into it.
Right.
She's like, well, if you don't want to go on the date, I guess you don't have to. I think maybe at first he does say, no, screw her, we should still go on the date. But
then
eventually
I
he
think somebody
capitulates.
like laughs or somebody yells
Or
from
there's
the other
another
side.
step in the joke or something
and
that happens.
it's some of the boys because he's new at school, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so he's trying to just sort of establish himself. So I think there's a group of boys kind of like watching their conversation, and they call out like, "Hey, man, do you need more money or something like that?" And he's just like, "Ugh," and he's really uncomfortable, and he's like, "Yeah, I guess we better just call it off." And she's like, okay. And then he walks away and she's really sad. And then again, the music like tells us as she's sitting there being sad, and then her face changes like, oh, she's going to do something to get back at Gia, but we don't know what yet.
Right. Revenge is forming in Stephanie's mind. Yeah, pretty soon, I think, we get what her plan is. Again, everything is about posting some sort of information about your enemy in like this common locker area. That's how all these things happen. But this time it's true. Because what she's going to do.
So her friend shows up at the house.
Yeah.
And she's like, did you bring it? And she's like, yeah. And she's got this file folder like tucked inside of her sweater. And so we see then the next morning the fruits of the friend's labor.
Yeah, it is Gia's report card.
Yes.
It's
all blown up, like big enough that it can hang like a poster in the hallway.
Yeah, exactly. She's enlarged the report card, which is all F's, and she's put it up on the wall for all to see. The first plot turn that's going to happen here is Stephanie is like, all right, you got what you gave, now we're even, huh? And then Gia turns around. Well, I guess, before that, of course, we get our Greek chorus. We get the kid in the Hawaiian shirt going like, hey, Gia, do you need a tutor? Or like, I don't know what the hell he says, some dumb line. And Stephanie's like, all right, you made fun of me,
Gia
I made
walks
fun of you.
away and like goes and opens her locker and kind of sticks her head in her locker like she's busy.
Yeah, so when Stephanie says, okay, now are even, Gia turns around and reveals that she has a tear on her face.
Yes, she's got tears coming. She's got wet streaks coming out of both eyes.
Yes, this was like if she was doing Shakespeare in the Park and you needed to make sure that the back row of the Delacorte Theater saw this tear on her face. Like, that's how big and noticeable it is.
Yes, there was a lot of I don't know what they use, like glycerin or something to make it shine underneath her cheeks.
It's true what you say, that they rely on the music more than anything else to tell the story. Like, why not give this kid, believe me, it's Full House. You have 27 characters. We have A through G storylines. Like, you don't have a lot of time, but give her just some line to yell in anguish or something, so it makes sense, or just something to happen. It's so weird the way she just turns around to be like, do you see? I have a tear.
Yeah.
I am crying.
And the music swells, the camera zooms in on her face, and she like looks furtively at Stephanie and then runs away. And then again, no words said, the camera swings back to Stephanie and the music changes and we realize Stephanie is feeling remorseful. Like, yes, she's gone too far.
Yes. Stephanie is haunted by remorse. That is very much going to be the sort of theme of the final act of this episode. But, all of this drama between Stephanie and Gia does not impact the human pudding, touring schedule.
The show is still going to go on.
The show must go on. So, we pick up at Jesse's Smash Club. This is another thing.
Well, so Jamie comes over to the house and says to Stephanie, I was stupid, let's still go on our date.
Okay, so they do mend ways, but that almost becomes a non-issue because it's really the Stephanie-Gia relationship that is the crux of the issue here.
Right, and so Stephanie's kind of pouting, and then, so they're all sitting there together, and Stephanie's trying to have a good time at the Smash Club.
Can we just, before we get into that stuff, I just want to talk about the music at the Smash Club for a second.
Sure.
Because it begins with a Muzak version of Black Cat by Janet Jackson.
Oh, I don't think I noticed that.
Yeah, I feel like it was one of those, maybe I'm wrong, but I could kind of pick out that melody. And, it would kind of make sense for like, oh, it's supposed to be a rock club and everything, but it's still like super mainstream.
That's so interesting. See, and I guess I didn't really notice it. I was too busy focusing on all of the like kid extras that were dancing in quotes at this club. I mean, look, I'm not as incredulous as I think I would be had I had a different upbringing, because my middle school was obsessed with this, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, this country line dancing club that had a teen night on Thursday nights. And my whole middle school would go. Like, that was, it was the thing. So this idea that there's like a teen club where the middle schoolers hang out is totally plausible to me. Yeah. Even though now I know that it was really strange and I had a like kind of singular experience growing up with this like club that our parents let us go to as middle schoolers.
It is, it's a little weird and contrived, particularly that Uncle Jesse, who's supposed to be a cool guy, would devote himself to a music club that is all for kids, but then again, he's surrounded by kids and he's a family guy.
I thought they just had like a teen night. I thought that was the thing with this Smash
Well, that
Club.
makes it more plausible. Otherwise, I would have suggested, it would make more sense if this was like part of a bowling alley. If it was some big like family rec center with all kinds
sorts
of
stuff. Things going on.
Yeah.
No, I think this is their answer to the Family Matters Rachel's Place.
Yeah, well, that's just what I was going to say, that this is a side trope that when you're getting into season 4, 5, 6 of your sitcom,
your teenagers need a place to hang out.
Well, also your rudderless adults need to have a venture like this. Like, this always happens.
These extra uncles and aunts need to stop living off the, Tanner Teat.
Yeah, how many times do we get this? Even in The Sopranos, it's a storyline. Oh, what if I open a club? Because it's always, you're into music, you're into stuff like that. So, I just feel like this is something that always happens. And Jesse's Smash Club is no exception.
Yep.
So we've got this Janet Jackson thing sound like playing
and the
in the
kids
background.
horribly dancing.
Yeah.
Very
And-
awkward and weird dancing going on.
Yeah, and then Gia and Stephanie kind of sit down and have their powwow.
Yeah, so Stephanie's on her date, and then I think her friend, and maybe it's the boy. It's the boy who's been the Greek chorus the whole time.
Yeah,
Scott. He's kind of on a date with her friend that's been helping her out, like through all of these, pranks and sadness and whatever. And so they're all sitting there together on like a double date, and then the guy is like, Jamie's like, well, I gotta go, I gotta go warm up or whatever. The band is we're gonna go on in a minute. So he leaves, and the friend says something to Stephanie about like, why are you looking so glum? And she's like, oh, I don't know. She's like, well, you're on your date. Aren't you happy? And she's like, yeah, I'm having a good time. And she's like, all right, well, cheer up. Hey, Scott, come dance with me. So she gets up, Uncle Jesse comes over, and that's when Stephanie reveals what happened and that she's feeling bad about it. And Uncle Jesse is like, well, you should talk to her. Like maybe you can fix this.
Well, and he says, you're a good person. She says, I thought revenge was supposed to be sweet. I thought this would feel good. And he says, he sort of gives her like a morality 1.0 lesson here. And he says like, no, if you're a good person, then making other people miserable doesn't feel good, even if they've done something wrong for you.
Yeah.
And
she's like, yeah. And then Gia comes in and she's sitting at the booth behind her. So she, Jesse goes off to, get things going with the band or whatever. And Stephanie decides to go have a heart-to-heart with Gia. Gia doesn't want to hear any of it, but Stephanie apologizes anyway. And then, it's like you said, this might be the moment that they turn the corner because, Gia's like, that was so awful. And she's like, well, you wouldn't have such a grade point, a low grade point average if you weren't skipping school all the time. And Gia's like, yeah, but everybody, like the teachers before I even get there already think I'm stupid and a bad girl anyway. So I don't everyone's already decided I'm that way. There's no point in me even showing up.
Yeah. And again, to mark a sign of the time, Stephanie says, Gia, it only matters what you think of yourself. And Gia goes, thanks, Barney, just to show
yeah, that's right.
shots fired, because it's not like Full House is not one to talk about being cheesy and
there was
lame
that
entertainment.
time where everybody hated Barney.
Yeah. And so they're eager to get that little dig in. But like I said, I think, in the future, Gia, she's a little bit like Nelson on The Simpsons, like if you need her to be a bully, she'll serve that role. But when you need a handful of kids to all kind of join forces, she'll be Stephanie's friend. And then we get the actual human pudding performance.
I'm sorry, but if you're going to talk about the human pudding performance, you have to say human pudding.
Yeah, well, that's what's funny to me is that there's a disconnect here where the music of human pudding
actually
is
doesn't sound
very
bad.
Proficient, way too proficient.
They're really good at their instruments.
It sounds like normal adult studio musicians playing like a really tight rock and roll song.
Shocking that it sounds that way.
Like nothing and believe me, I've been to lots of concerts by, middle school and high school rock bands. This sounds absolutely nothing like what their playing would sound like.
They had layers of the instruments and
totally
a synthesizer. I was like, what is happening?
But the song itself
is just
what they would say. Yeah. It is just them going, human pudding! We're human pudding! And so, it was just a weird...
We're pudding!
Yeah. I felt like they could have put a little effort into making the music sound kind of weird and crappy, but no, they decided to do it like that. So again, in terms of tracking the trope, we get the escalation and we get the lesson learning. It's just that the pranks aren't so much pranks as they are devious, sinister attempts to
tear
ruin
each
somebody.
other down. Yeah.
All right, moving on to iCarly.
Season 4, episode 3, but if you're looking for it on streaming, it's listed as season 3, episode 3, I get Pranky.
Yeah, so iCarly, we've talked about it before. We love it. This one starts like they always do with the iCarly show within the show. We start with Gibby. The joke is that Gibby is standing in a bucket. He's trying to guess what is in the bucket, and it turns out to be random hair. Horrific, right? This really grossed me out. But yeah, that's that thing. And then they're looking at a video that's been sent into them. That's a prank that these two boys pulled on
one of their dads.
Yeah. Yeah. Blood-filled pickles, also horrific.
Yeah.
Like this dad starts munching on pickles.
Like, well, so it's this huge, like, deli-style pickle, right? Like, one of these, I mean, like, if you wrapped your hand around this pickle, your fingers would barely touch. Like, that's the kind, like, huge pickle. And he's sitting there with his sandwich and his chips, and he's got this giant pickle, and he bites into it, and just blood pours out of it all over his face, and he's like, ah!
Yeah, like his mouth is brimming with blood, like faint blood. It's just a really like disquieting image. And so they all get a kick out of that. And later on, when they're hanging out in Carly's palatial multi-level bedroom, right? Carly and Sam and Freddie are all relaxing in the bedroom. And they start reminiscing about pranks. You know,
all the
Sam
pranks
is talking
that they've
about her
pulled
pranks.
over the years that, you know, Sam has pulled and Freddie has pulled. And they say, hey, Carly, what was your favorite prank you ever pulled? And Carly's like, I never pulled a prank.
Well, Carly says, do knock-knock jokes count as pranks? And Sam says they don't even count as jokes. Yeah. And then, and this is interesting in light of course, the recent documentary about that sick pervert, that horrible...
All right, hold on. Are you talking about Dan Schneider, or are you talking about the actual child molester that worked on the shows?
No, well, I guess I was being facetious about the part of the documentary that was about Dan Schneider's sense of humor.
Right.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, because the girls eat tiny pickles in this, and so I was just wondering if they were going to, like, throw that up there as yet another example of his depravity and the things that he made kids do. And, you know, it was Gibby's feet that were in a bucket of hair, and he definitely has a foot fetish, according to that documentary. Now, we're being very glib, but like, I'm going to say this. We both were obsessed with this documentary.
Oh, yeah. That documentary about Dan Schneider and these shows was hugely popular. We both kind of agreed. Very, very uneven and journalistically weird.
Yes.
And it's a hodgepodge of very, very serious, real stuff about molestation and things like that. And then this other interesting but much more wishy-washy argument about Dan Schneider's sense of humor.
Right,
and that there was this sexual undertone and this innuendo in all of these shows. And look, you know, by all means, watch the documentary, form your own opinion. But I just bring it up because this joke that we're about to talk about, I think very much is that Dan Schneider thing that they're talking about. Where Carly starts talking about pranking as though she's talking about losing her virginity.
Yes.
That is the joke. It's unsaid.
It's that, but it's also, it's like losing your virginity and also like drugs. It becomes drugs later on.
Well, yes, later on with
when
Spencer,
they do
it
the
morphs
intervention.
into, yes, it absolutely morphs into a drug thing. But just for this particular beat, there is a joke where Carly says, hey, it's not a big deal. It just hasn't happened yet. But hey, when I meet the right person, it is very much like, oh, haha, she's using the language that teenagers use when they haven't lost their virginity yet. Not a big deal one way or the other, but I clocked it.
Definitely, I did too. And it's definitely not something that most of the kids who are watching the show would get. But as we always say when we're talking about iCarly, that you and I both kind of fell in love with this show as adults, you know?
And the kids performing it would definitely get it. Like kids that age
because
would.
they were old enough. They were in there. They were older, you
15,
know, exactly. 15, 16. They would know what was going on. They would think it was kind of funny that they were saying those jokes and be able to say them with the like wink and a smile. But all of that is to say, I think before we leave off the documentary, right? Because there is that connection about this joke and the thing. It is just to say, like, I don't think that we also are saying, oh, well, there was nothing substantial in the documentary about Dan Schneider. No, there absolutely was. And I think what my takeaway is that this man who was in charge of all of these shows and the creator of all of these shows created a work environment that allowed child predators a place to hide, because it was also a hostile work environment to women and to anyone that Dan felt like, didn't bow to him in the way that he wanted to be bowed to. And so it is that type of like narcissistic personality as a boss that creates toxic workplaces where these other horrible things can hide and thrive.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't want to go to bat for the guy just because he was Dennis on Head of the Class. But the narrative of that documentary was very much complicated by the fact that the most serious aspect of it, the child abuse thing, Schneider was the only one to take the kid's side in court. And just the fact that this narrative that they had so few of the people that worked with him participate in this documentary. Right. They had so much punditry around it.
Right.
And
the
none of
actual
the people...
accusations against him for creating this, like, for basically sexually harassing the female writers on his staff in different ways, those allegations and those like real things that happened, they kind of felt like their point was made less strong by the fact that you had these other, like BuzzFeed reporters basically commenting on it like media gadflies and trying to make these specious connections to the other things.
So back to the pranks. Carly's first attempt is going to be dropping a fish on Gibby at school or putting it in his locker or something.
Right.
And it just delights him. He calls up his dad and says,
Fire up the grill!
Yes. And so when Carly says to Sam, I kind of got him, Sam goes, you got him dinner. And so it totally doesn't work. Carly has to go and ask Spencer if he has any advice. And that's when Spencer tells of his crazy origin story with pranks.
That's right. Well, so Spencer tries to get out of the conversation immediately.
Oh, yes. It's very funny.
When Carly's like, I need help with, pranking. And what does he say?
He goes, I have to go now. And just immediately just stands up and goes to leave the room.
Yes. And so she's like, no, come on. And then he tells us that, and we get the like fuzzy edges of this memory. When he was in 9th grade, he had really just gotten into pranking. He was at the peak of his prank time, which I feel like is the peak of one's prank time, being like a 14-year-old boy.
That is an appropriate time to be pranking. He's played by a little kid that to me looked like a young Stifler more than a young
He had the
Spencer.
big smile. He didn't look like a young Spencer, but he did have that kind of like big mischievous smile.
We still have Jerry Trainer doing the voice while this kid's talking.
And so he tells us this story of his prank that went too far, involving 200 pounds of garlic powder that he somehow suspended over the staircase, a la Saved by the Bell, that everyone hangs out on in between classes.
Yeah.
And a rope that appears out of nowhere hanging from the landing of this staircase. And he pulls the rope while all these kids are in between classes hanging on the staircase, and 200 pounds of garlic powder descends upon them, and he's laughing and cackling, and it's so funny. And then all of a sudden the kids are all like, it burns my eyes!
No.
And everyone had to be hauled off to the hospital or the science labs to get an eye wash done, because who would have known that garlic powder stings when it gets in your eyes?
Now, talking about weird allusions and innuendos, did you take this as a reference to like Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
Oh my God,
I did?
no, what?
I kind of think that was the joke. They make that same joke in the movie Sausage Party. I think a few other things. That the imagery, because like you said,
they're covered in ash.
Yeah, it dumps the garlic powder on him. So it's all just like this white smoke and everyone's covered in powder and just sort of milling around like dazed and anguished. It kind of had the vibe to me of like, yes, this is like what you see in movies walking around in Fallout, you know, like after a disaster
after
like
a horrible
that.
disaster.
Yeah. And so he's
they were doing the slow motion thing too with the video. Okay, I kind of see. Yeah.
And he's going like, I just wanted to be funny. It was just a joke. And so that brings us back to the present day. And Spencer is like, I made a solemn vow to never again pull a prank, and I never have.
Yes.
And Carly is like, just give me prank advice.
Right. And she basically like tempts him with one little drink. And so he helps her come up with this prank to pull on Freddie and Sam. And so I guess Freddie and Sam get a text that's like, hey, come up to the studio, you know, something. And so they walk in the studio and there's a dinner like place set with
like a platter
with one of those
big dome lid thing.
I can't remember what that's called. There's a name for that dome thing
I would call it a lid.
Yeah, but it's not. There's an actual name for it that I can't remember. It's escaping me right now. And so that you would take off to present the turkey or whatever.
Or that is basically only used in pranks and magic tricks where somebody's head is meant to go inside.
Right, or some kind of foot or some like body part, right? So anyway, so they pick up this little card that is left on the table, and it's signed by what's his name? They're like arch enemy who kidnapped Carly at some point. Yeah, Neville. And so it's signed by him, and they were like, oh my God, how did he even get in here? Oh no. And then they lift up the lid, and Carly, it's like her decapitated head, and she's just got her tongue out like, eh.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they use this in the opening theme song afterwards.
Yes.
This is, the old crawl into the box and stick up your head and make it look like your head is decapitated on a platter joke. And it gets them. They all scream.
And then Spencer jumps out and does his little dance, which, God, I love Jerry Trainer so much.
Okay, so Carly has her laugh. Ha ha, I finally did a prank on you guys. See, I'm not so lame after all.
The king helped me.
Yeah. And now Spencer, you can see already.
Because, by the way, he's not the master like Coach was.
No, he's the king. Yes. And you can see the juices are starting to flow. The blood's pumping. Like he's starting to get that look in his eyes.
He's got that itch in his eye. Like he's like, I got to play another prank.
So, they're like, all right, now, Spencer, this is one and done, right? You're not going to pull any pranks. He's like, uh-huh.
I'm good.
And then what follows is the most amazing montage. And this flashed me back because this song that they play, it's called The Joke Is On You by Nikki Watkins.
Jeez.
It is your total, Nickelodeon, Disney Channel pop song, but it is so catchy. And I remember when this came out the first time around, this was when I think the days of LimeWire and Napster were over, but I was still ripping music off YouTube and burning onto my MP3 player and stuff. At some point, I don't think it lasted long, but at some point I downloaded this because this was just like love at first sight with this song. It's just such a banger. And this sequence is Jerry Trainer as Spencer pulling all of these pranks and doing these crazy dances the whole time.
Every single time when the prank has been pulled, he jumps out and is like, oh yeah, like pointing at them and shaking his hips.
The things that he does, is it Tebow? Is that the name of the guy?
Yes.
So he pranks Tebow with an exploding smoothie.
Yes.
He pranks Sam at school with a brick wall inside her locker somehow. He gets Freddie by taking his AV card and making it vanish via a suspension harness from the ceiling.
Yes.
He gets Gibby with this fire hose water fountain thing coming out of the toilet. He gets a random old couple in the smoothie restaurant by stealing their onion rings. And then finally...
with like a fishing wire because it zooms across the room.
And then he gets Carly by having her video mirror thing in her bedroom bathroom turn into a zombie.
Yes,
and
when
every
she's going to
single
put on her
time,
makeup.
Yes, the prank happens. It's whatever it is. And then he jumps out and does this crazy dance, perfectly synced up to this amazing song. It is like the best 2 minutes we have ever watched for this podcast.
It is
It's
really
so good.
enjoyable. And that last scene that you're talking about, her video mirror thing, once he like takes over it with the zombie video, then she screams, jumps back, the zombie video goes away, and it's a video of him doing the little funny dance. But then he jumps out behind her and starts doing the little funny dance in person. So he's like funny dancing with himself on the TV. And what's the other great thing about this sequence is that the other actor or actors in the scene with him who have been pranked or basically just directed to look at him with disgust and a little bit of fear in their eyes.
Yes.
And
Confusion.
exactly. And they just like freeze in that pose while this dancing is going down. And they let it run just a little bit longer to make it that awkward. It is so brilliant. Like, just go watch that part. The clip is on YouTube. Like, just that like 2 minutes. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's really good. Later on, he gets Sam and Freddie with the plexiglass in front of the elevator, which is basically like what they did to me
The
at the
cellophane,
poker game. Yeah. At some point, Carly sits him down and has a talk. They try at first to counter prank him.
Yes.
And they can't get one on him.
Right.
They
So
do this thing with the $20 bill.
Yes, they have a $20 bill laying on the floor in the basement.
Yeah, the same
Carly
basement
brings
from
them
the
down.
penny teas
Yes,
thing.
which is like a couple episodes later. But so Carly brings him down, but Sam and Freddie are already down there and they've set Gibby up. He's crawled up in the rafters and is supposed to drop down on top of Spencer the minute Spencer bends over to pick up the $20
when they
bill.
say Gibby.
When they say Gibby, right? So Spencer sees this from a mile away, puts his gum on the end of a broom's handle, picks up the $20 bill
This
from
is
the
a
end of
very
a broom
dumb
handle.
prank.
Yes,
This was
is
a stupid idea.
Well, he'd get hurt. Like, they'd both get hurt. I don't
And you
understand.
just the thing of a $20 bill lying in the middle of the floor
Right.
while you're in the midst of a prank war. Like, yeah, come on,
Of
give the
course.
guy a little credit.
So anyway, he's like, you can't prank the king. And then they all are like, all
Yeah.
right, well, let's
well, what
go
he does,
leave.
he slaps her with the $20 bill and leaves. And she goes,
yeah, he like
slapped
swats
me.
her with
Yeah.
it back and forth across her face.
Yeah, Carly goes, he slapped me with my own money. And then, yeah, they have no choice but to stage an intervention.
That's right.
So
Well,
this
so they
is
go
where,
to leave, and then Gibby drops from
Yeah.
the ceiling because they're like, "Come on, Gibby," and he's like, "Gibby," and then falls face
Yeah,
down.
and
Which,
so-
by the way, that was a remarkably good dummy.
Oh, yeah.
Because it didn't bounce like the way, when they normally throw like a crash test dummy, in scenes like that. This one was remarkably well made. Like, it was cut together really well so that when that thing bounced, it didn't look super, super fake. And then they replaced it with the real actor face down. I was like, okay, production quality better than every other sitcom we've watched.
It's not like the Al Bundy that they used to
Right,
toss across.
exactly.
So this is where the metaphor goes to drugs. And we have the intervention.
Well, even earlier when he talks about his addiction to
Yeah,
it.
that's true. But we have the intervention now where we have all of his old friends, his old classmates that were
Yes.
his victims in the Nagasaki-esque garlic powder attack. They're sitting in the living room and, just like a drug intervention, they give their little speeches, right? And confront him.
They say it starts like that, and then they're like, "Oh, we need to get the camera," and they're like, "Yes, Carly, you need to go get the camera." And Spencer's like, "What do you need to get the camera for?" She's like, "So we can record this and remind you of it if you ever decide to start pranking again." And all the friends, like the old high school chums, are like, "Oh, yes, you need to do that. Go, go, go." Well, they're just trying to get her out of the room because then the minute she comes back, all those people are gone. Intervention is over. And or they're in the process of walking out, and Spencer's on the ground having had his ass kicked by all these grown ass people who are still mad about the garlic powder from all those years ago.
Yeah, and so that's the ultimate resolution to the episode, right? They just beat him up, and that's basically how Spencer gets convinced.
Yeah,
to
they're
not
like,
prank
I
anymore.
mean, Carly's like, "Did you learn your lesson?" And he's like, "I learned several,"
Yeah, I like it. Like, it's sitcom-y as hell, but I would rather have it be sitcom-y in that way than have the cheesy music and have the Full House thing where
like,
we all
I've
learn a lesson.
realized it.
Yeah, I guess what was nice about this one is that because it's Spencer, it's like he has to learn a lesson, but not the same way it would be if Carly has to do it. There doesn't need to be a real character development thing. It can be more silly and sort of cartoonish. So yeah, looking back over these, certainly lots of ideas for pranks if you want to pull stunts and gags and stuff. What are we thinking? What are your overall thoughts?
Oh, come on. iCarly is the winner chicken dinner. I have the same, I'll say the same things that I always do. I like the oldest one because of the way there's no muss, no fuss. We're going straight through this plot from beginning to end. No side stories, no, distractions. This is a show about pranking and somebody learning their lesson, and we're going right through it. And then, of course, I love the most recent one, which is iCarly, because it is the best written. It's the best acted. It made me laugh out loud. None of the other ones make you groan or sort of like snicker to yourself because like you get the jokes before the writers even write them because they're bad. But like iCarly never fails to make me laugh out loud. It's just so fun.
Yeah, I think for me, I agree. Obviously, the iCarly one is amazing for all the reasons you said, and because anytime that it puts Jerry Trainer front and center.
Oh, hell yeah.
There's a part we didn't mention when they're pleading with him to stop pranking, and he does this maniacal, super high-pitched thing where he goes, "Will that make the little children happy? Would you like me to stop the pranking?" And it's just so funny. Like, he's so good. And yeah, it's so rare that he gets to be like evil.
Yeah,
like
right.
that.
Like chewing the scenery. He always chews the scenery. But yeah, so much fun. And even better now that we, having watched the documentary and having heard how like he was the adult that was kind of constantly on set protecting the kids from the wrath.
Yeah. And then I'll also acknowledge the coach one to me, I feel like really kind of hits that sweet spot of like, I think that's what I had in mind the most when we went into this prank. When we went into this trope. It was like a true
back and forth prank war,
and the
not
pranks
just
are,
one person.
I put a coloring in your shampoo. I stole your clothes when you were in the shower. Like just
I
your
left
good
bees in your office.
Yes, bees, fire ants, your good old-fashioned pranks, your classics. All right, so much for the practical jokes. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, we're mixing it up. We're going to do a Saved by the Bell mixtape. We've covered Saved by the Bell 4 times on the podcast, so you're going to get to rehear all of those episodes. 3 of them are OG Saved by the Bell and 1 college years. So get ready to get out your speed pills and have a good old time.
Yep, and we will also be taking a Saved by the Bell quiz that I may or may not edit in a way that conceals an embarrassing mistake I made. That's all next time, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.